nor those of our babies. Had she not been mentally and spiritually strong and in such excellent physical condition prior to becoming pregnant, her body might not have been able to endure the strain. When the invitation from the President's office had arrived in our mailbox several weeks earlier, Gina and I were excited about attending. But as the event drew nearer, we realized it might be dangerous for Gina and our babies to be flying across the country from California to Washington, D.C., especially in light of the complications we'd already experienced during the pregnancy. We decided it would be best for Gina to remain at home, and I'd take my brother Aaron along with me, and our good friends Dennis Berman, a successful Dallas businessman who had agreed to be our children's godparent, and John Hensley, the former head of the U.S. Customs. Phil Cameron, my personal protection officer, who often accompanied me to events where I'd be in large crowds, had flown ahead to Washington a few days earlier to make sure the details of my trip were in order. The four of us flew to Washington on a private chartered jet the day of the event. Phil joined us at the Pentagon. We were ushered out to the Pentagon Promenade, where we were greeted by Air Force Police Honor Guard, and I received an Achievement Award from the Air Force for being an outstanding airman. They also made me an honorary Air Force recruiter. We posed for photographs on the promenade in the exact same spot where 9/11 terrorists would crash an airliner a few months later. We spent the remainder of our afternoon touring the Pentagon, having lunch with several generals, and enjoying a fascinating visit with the Secret Service Director, Brian L. Stafford. We planned to return to California the following morning. Prior to the presidential dinner, the new President and First Lady Laura Bush and I posed for a special picture to commemorate the occasion. Ever gracious, the President thanked me for my support and for being a friend of the Bush family. It had been a day to remember, and I could hardly wait to call Gina after dinner to tell her about it. But now, Gina was lying in a hospital emergency room in California. Suddenly, what really matters in life came into clear focus. In a moment, with one sentence, my entire priority list had just been altered. Call the pilots, Phil. Tell them that we're leaving right now. Yes, sir. I wanted to get to Gina as soon as possible, so as soon as Phil could rouse the pilots, I wanted to be in the air. I said my goodbyes to the remaining dignitaries still at the gala while Phil contacted the pilots. Between shaking hands, smiling, and offering best wishes, I'd glance in Phil's direction, waiting for his signal that told me we were on our way. It didn't come. Instead, the look on Phil's face told me that he wasn't pleased. I've got the pilots on the phone, Phil said, but you may want to talk to him. Phil handed his cell phone to me. I took the phone and said, "What's the problem?" The pilot spoke haltingly. "I'm sorry, Mr. Norris, but my co-pilot had a beer, and I'd prefer not to fly tonight." "What? What do you mean you prefer not to fly?" "Well, we really weren't planning on going back to L.A. tonight, so I didn't think it would matter for him to have a drink. But since he did, it's against regulations for us to fly tonight." I was furious, but I knew the pilot was right. Under different circumstances, I might even have appreciated his integrity and truthfulness. After all, the pilot could have easily deceived me. He didn't have to tell me. I'd have never known that his co-pilot had taken a drink, and in light of the emergency back home, I might not have cared. "How soon can we leave?" I asked. "Not before 5:30 tomorrow morning," the pilot replied. 5:30? I looked at my watch. It was only 11 o'clock. There was nothing left to do but try to find alternative transportation. Aaron, Dennis, John, Phil, and I hurried back to my room at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. We tried desperately to get a commercial flight, but to no avail. We called every place we could find, hoping to hire another private plane in D.C., but the earliest we could get another crew to depart was at 3:30. Pacing back and forth in the room, my mind raced with the obvious contradictions. I had been a 6-time world karate champion. I had starred in more than 23 motion pictures in which I had played a hero. I had more recently starred in Walker, Texas Ranger, my own television series, for 8 years, again playing the hero. Yet there was nothing I could do to help my wife. I had earned millions of dollars over my lifetime. I had been a friend to several presidents, Yet all the money in my bank account couldn't help me now. My friendships with men and women of influence were not enough. There was only one person to whom I could turn. I prayed, "Oh God, please take care of my wife and our babies." Phil gave me his cell phone to call Gina at the hospital to tell her that we'd been delayed. I was able to reach her, but she was so distraught and groggy I could hardly discern a word that she said. Gina was able to communicate to me that she was going to be operated on at 8 o'clock the following morning. Apparently, the doctor had presented a bleak scenario as he explained to Gina all the things that might go wrong. I told her that I'd get home as soon as I could. I tried to encourage her. We prayed briefly over the phone and said our goodbyes. "I love you, sweetheart. I'll be home with you soon." Our bags were packed and sitting right by the hotel room door, ready to go. I was too frustrated to sleep, so the guys and I stayed up all night, talking, pacing, praying, and ticking the minutes off the clock. At 5:30 sharp, we were rolling down the runway. The moment our plane landed in California, I bounded down the steps and raced to the hospital, arriving at 10 o'clock Pacific time. Gina was already in the recovery room. As I stepped inside the room, I saw Gina lying in bed, covered by a crisp white sheet. She looked so pale and fragile. The woman whom I'd grown to depend on in all facets of my life now seemed so frail. I leaned over and kissed her gently. "Baby, I'm so sorry I wasn't here for you." I started to apologize. "I'm never going to leave you again." "You're here now," she said. "That's all that matters." I looked at the woman who loved me so much that she was willing to step into the valley of the shadow of death to give birth to our children. The doctor had said that if we could keep Gina in bed for the next 10 weeks or so, he felt sure that the babies would be fine. Gina's commitment to do whatever was necessary for the benefit of her children reminded me of another woman of tremendous faith, my mom. My mom had gone through awful travail trying to bring me into this world. In fact, like Gina and our babies, my mom and I had to struggle against the odds to survive.
Chapter 2. Mixed Motivators.
My mother, Wilma Norris, was only 18 years of age when she gave birth to me, after enduring an exhausting 7 days in labor. She went to the hospital on Sunday, March 3rd, and I was not born until the following Sunday. Several times during the difficult delivery, the doctors feared that they were going to lose her or me, or both of us. Finally, in the early hours of March 10th, 1940, I weighed in at 6 pounds, 8 ounces. My mom's concerns were far from over. Something wasn't right. My skin color was all wrong. My tiny body was a dark shade of bluish purple. My father, Ray Norris, was in the delivery room along with both of my grandmothers. And when he first caught a glimpse of me, he was so unnerved that he fainted right on the spot. The doctors and nurses weren't too concerned about my dad, but they were extremely concerned about me. They recognized me as a blue baby, which means that I had not begun breathing immediately after birth, thus causing my skin to turn the deathly color. They had to act fast to save my life, even faster to prevent the lack of oxygen from doing permanent damage to my brain. The doctor hastily placed me on oxygen to jumpstart my lungs. It worked, and before long, I was gulping air like a pro. Nevertheless, for the first 5 days of my life, the doctors weren't sure I was going to make it. They kept me in an isolation unit, similar to the neonatal intensive care unit nowadays, to prevent me from contamination and also to keep a close watch on me. I was too weak to eat normally, so Mom expressed milk for me, and I was fed with an eyedropper. Extremely weak herself, Mom was not permitted to see me during that time. She still has a letter written by my grandmother dated that week, telling my aunt that Wilma's baby probably isn't going to live. But Mom and I surprised everyone. We pulled through, and before long, the doctors discharged my mother and me. Mom later told me that from the first moment she saw me, she looked